when it was going on, I was feeling sick to the stomach about going to work, so I often took time off work because I was feeling physically ill. My anxiety was so bad. And even when I was at work, I was paranoid. I'm thinking, oh God, what's the day going to bring? And is he going to ask me in his office?
There's a good chance that at some point in your career, you'll come across a workplace bully, either as a victim or a bystander. The experience can have a profound impact on your well-being.
And it affected my mental health. It had that big impact on my self-esteem and self-worth.
Hi, I'm Sana Kadar, and today on All in the Mind, workplace bullies, corporate psychopaths, and what motivates them. According to Beyond Blue, about 1 in 2 Australian employees will experience bullying at some point in their careers. Victim stories like Tina's abound, though that's not her real name. But you know who you never hear from? Bullies themselves. We searched for a former or reformed workplace bully to speak to, someone who had gained insight into their behaviour and could explain what motivated them. Finding someone so self-aware and willing to chat was, as you can imagine, a stretch. We came up empty-handed.
I think there's 2 reasons. One is people don't want to personally admit if they've bullied others. And the other category is I think some people who have bullied others don't want to admit it at all to anyone, even themselves, or they may not realise, or they may not acknowledge that they've been a bully. My understanding is that there is some data that exists, and if people are answering a survey anonymously, they're much more likely to admit it.
Dr. Rachel Hannam is a psychologist and workplace mediator. She's worked on dozens of bullying cases, mostly in government, education, and NGOs. I asked her whether, in her experience, those accused of bullying ever own up to their behaviour.
Sometimes. It's, probably less than half the time that they would own up to that behaviour. Very often, if the bullying has been going on and the workplace deals with it, it takes a long time, and staff who are being bullied continue to leave. I've seen that situation, and it goes on until the bully quits their job.
SafeWork Australia defines workplace bullying as repeated, unreasonable behaviour directed at an employee or group of employees that creates a risk to health and safety. Repeated is the key word here. One-off incidents don't count. Tina's experience was especially harrowing because it began with sexual harassment. It's had a lasting impact on her career and mental health.
So about 20 years ago, I was a young executive working in a medium-sized business, and my boss, who was in fact a director of the organisation, made numerous sexual advances, sleazy comments, which I managed to deflect on most occasions. But the particular incident, which was a real turning point, it was a bit more calculated, was on a regional trip, and we were travelling in his car to a regional country town, and he had organised the accommodation, and when we turned up at the accommodation he had indicated that there was only one room available, so we had to share a room. And I was frightened. I didn't know what to do. I was in a country town and I felt completely powerless. I was cornered. And, I had to just go along with what happened. And it wasn't by choice. I felt cornered. I really felt cornered. And it was totally against my moral compass. I just had to let him take advantage of me. And I have a lot of guilt around that, and I still to this day have to work through those emotions. It had a massive impact on my self-esteem and self-worth because I started to sort of, question myself.
After that trip, Tina avoided being alone with her boss and shut down any advances. That's when his behaviour switched to bullying.
So from that point on, he then excluded me from various meetings and emails and often gaslighted me. So he'd humiliate me in meetings in front of other colleagues about particular tasks that I supposedly hadn't completed, and really led me to believe that I'd overlooked something. But when I looked deeper, I found that I was actually never included in a lot of those emails or tasks or meetings in the first place. So after about 12 months or so of this behaviour, he called me into his office and told me my position had been made redundant and that there wasn't any other position available for me within the business.
That's awful. How did you feel at that point?
So when I look back now, a redundancy was a good outcome, but at the time it was a real insult to injury. You know, those that have ever been made redundant will understand that it really makes you question your ability and worth. And I was already broken. And, you know, I left things, you know, I swept it under the carpet. I can cope with this, I can just move on, and didn't realise the underlying effects that it would have on my mental health and that downward spiral that led me to depression and suicidal thoughts at a later stage.
The way Tina was treated is appalling, but sadly it isn't unique, though not all cases of bullying overlap with sexual harassment. And while bullying can have a profound impact on victims and their mental health, it also poses a cost to business and the economy. According to Safe Work Australia, workers with psychological distress take 4 times as many sick days per month compared to other employees. Lost productivity as a result of bullying is estimated to cost the economy up to $36 billion annually. So why do bullies do it? And why do organisations allow it? Dr. Victor Soho researches workplace abuse at the University of Melbourne.
One of the key things that we have identified in many contexts is people thinking that bullying could be an effective instrument to get other people to perform. So basically, people think of humiliating behavior, of offensive behavior as a way to enhance your performance. And you know, when you say it this way, it obviously sounds counterintuitive, but a lot of people think that shouting at you or yelling at you or making condescending remarks when they are giving you feedback, that's a way for you to get a grip. When in fact, if people are not really explaining to you what you did wrong or how to do things better, obviously the humiliation and the condescension are not going to help. Another thing that definitely is a clear norm that motivates bullying is people thinking that it is okay to use bullying and aggression as a way to compete with other people. So imagine in a team, people are competing for bonuses or for specific important projects, and then they start undermining each other because that's the way to enhance their own performance relative to others. Then there are other elements that we wouldn't think of them as motivating factors for abuse, but more as enabling conditions for abuse. So you could think about how tolerant the organization is for abuse. And we could think of tolerance in 2 ways, in terms of what processes or practices are in place to manage any incident of abuse. So if there are clear policies, if people could go on the intranet of the organization and look at the policy and see what is going to happen if somebody behaves inappropriately, if we have noticed in the past that there is a clear reporting mechanism that people follow through and an independent investigation. So all of these things tell you that structurally, we don't tolerate abuse in this organization. And at the same time, you have another component that could be thought of as being softer, which is how leaders behave. So do leaders make clear public statements of support for respectful behavior at work? Do leaders call out inappropriate behavior even when they think it's on the lower intensity side of the behavior?
So what kinds of workplaces in particular enable bullying, and what kinds are effective at preventing it?
From the research, what we know is work environments that are hyper-competitive. So where people have to compete all the time for very large rewards. So we're talking about 2 different factors here that are closely related. So hyper-competition